Tommy's gone. It's hard to believe. It was a good idea not to let your little brother come to the funeral. Hey, I don't like this place. Something weird is going on up
there. The funeral is about to begin, sir.
You are listening to Dark Notes Podcast. I'm Lisa, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Shane.
Hello.
Today's episode is
Cemetery Gates.
All right, we dug up accounts. The first one I'm going to read is from Haunted Roanoke by L.B. Taylor Jr.
Cool.
And it's called By the Grave's Early Light. Started. However, it is not his ghostly form that has been sighted roaming across isolated, long deserted cemeteries in the Burnt Chimney region of the county. It is rather a specter of his brother, who continues a spectral search for his life savings, which disappeared from his grave in a bizarre manner 150 or so. William Early's nocturnal ventures manifest themselves as a strange light that has been seen but never explained by hundreds of witnesses over several generations. Many people have seen it, said local historian Gertrude Mann, but nobody knows. Some believe it to be the gentle golden light of Early's lantern as his spirit wanders restlessly from tombstone to tombstone, searching for his lost treasure.
Oh, that's wild.
Right?
Yeah.
The legend has an intriguing origin. William Early died in the and was buried with his money beside him. Just why his wife and children allowed this has never been known. Perhaps they were unaware of it, or curiously, he may have thought that you really could take it with you. Nevertheless, in time, his widow fell in love with the family farm's overseer, and they decided to get married. This appalled Mrs. Early's children, who felt that their mother was lowering herself in society. So they decided to take matters in hands. As one newspaper reporter wrote, they decided to stop the wedding with the help of an uninvited guest. It was deemed that drastic measures were necessary, and their macabre actions were shocking to say the least. William Early's sons went to their father's grave, dug up the coffin, and carried it back to the farmhouse. They stood the glass-covered coffin upright at the base of the stairs to greet their mother when she descended the steps in her wedding gown. Right?
Jesus.
Alas, the eerie plot did not. Mrs. Early defiantly strode past the corpse and walked into the parlor where the marriage then took place. The sons reburied the remains of the father in another gravesite, the exact location of which is today unknown. Somehow in the process, William's money was either lost or stolen. Ever since then, Early's light has been sighted dancing across remote graves from the Burnt Chimney section all the way to the Roanoke County line. Many have seen the light in darkness. Others have chased it, seeking a sane and sensible solution to its appearances. No one has ever succeeded. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. It's like I'm... Some longtime residents dismiss the light as being caused by swarms of flies, but there are no fireflies in the dead of winter. Some have said that it is the light of hunters' lanterns, but no hunters have ever stepped forward to justify this possibility. It is, say old-timers, the ghostly light of William Early, Jubal Early's brother, who cannot rest in peace until he finds his money lost more than a century and a half ago. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I agree with the old timers. Yeah, I read about that particular spook light, but I didn't remember the legend.
Right.
Or I didn't know of the legend. That's great. I love it.
It's like,
yeah,
fucking kids.
I know. Where it's so funny. It reminds me there was a kid back when Howard Stern was awesome, the golden era, like around the late 90s, early 2000s. This guy called in, this teenager, and he was on acid. He called in and he had just done this. He was the son of a funeral parlor owner, and these kids who bullied him. One of their girlfriends of like the jobs had died, and her body was at the funeral home.
Right.
He was on acid. He stole her body and put it on the doorstep of the boyfriend, rang the doorbell, and cranked up Slayer from his car. So the kid comes out, sees the corpse of his girlfriend, and flips, of course. Right. Calls the police, and he was hiding out from the police at a friend's house when he called Howard Stern and told the story.
That is crazy.
It reminded me of that, propping up the body for like some morbid prank. Oh man,
that's crazy.
Jeez. You want me to go? Okay. This is from Preston Dennett, who we love, the UFO researcher. This is an older article. This is 2002 from the June 2002 MUFON Journal, their monthly newsletter. And the article is called UFOs and Cemeteries. This is one of the cases.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So, case 10, Dean Memorial Cemetery. This next case is without a doubt the most complex and chilling of all graveyard UFO encounters. Investigated by veteran journalist Bob Teets, this case involves dozens of witnesses, all of whom have regularly seen UFOs hovering over the local graveyard in Elk Garden, West Virginia. The sightings seem to concentrate over a particular area called Nethkin Hill. However, the only thing on the hill is a small church surrounded by cemeteries, including Nethkin Cemetery, Caldwell Cemetery, and the Dean Memorial Cemetery. The sightings began in the early 1960s and seem to be continuing today. The Jones family is only one of many families of this small town that have seen UFOs over the local cemetery. In April of 1968, two members of the family were driving by the graveyard when they saw a bright ball of light hovering overhead. Both watched as the 100-foot orange sphere moved brazenly over their vehicle. They could also now see a metallic structure to the object and could hear a high-pitched buzzing noise. Overcome with fear, they sped away. The object, however, followed them home, hovering above their car. The terrified couple darted into the home and woke up relatives who came outside and also saw the object, which began to dart from place to place and then left. Another family who has seen objects over the local graveyards are the Caldwells, who actually have their own family cemetery. Says Amy Caldwell, we'd see lights all during the late 1960s and early 70s going back and forth around the church area. The church is adjacent to the graveyard. I never wanted to see them, but I did. We would watch the lights and go through a process of elimination. Not a plane, not a helicopter, and so forth, and try to figure out what they were. I always thought we heard a high-pitched sound, and then when we would look out the window, the lights were always white. Amy's sister, Vicky, also remembers the sightings. She says, I saw a silvery white, elliptical-shaped thing in the sky. I was thinking, that's not an airplane or a helicopter. Your mind plays tricks on you when you're frightened, and I remember being afraid. After these sightings, we were always afraid. Another member of the family, Clark Coball, reports his own encounter in mid-July 1970. Clark says, I was looking out the window toward Neckin Hill Cemetery when I saw an object moving in the sky over the cemetery. Within a flash, it's right over the house. I'm looking directly up at the bottom of this object, which is possibly cigar-shaped to elliptical, somewhere in between. A lot of bright lights on the bottom, very bright, 10 to 15 bright lights. As quickly as it's there, bam, it's gone again. Then I see the lights toward Elk Garden or Neckin Hill Cemetery again. Another witness to the Dean Memorial Graveyard UFO sightings is local residents and mail carrier Dixon Ritter. With his residence only 1 mile north of the graveyards, Dixon had an excellent view of the area. On one occasion, Dixon saw a brilliant white light with a sharp outline of its edge. It was about 5 feet in diameter and was just a few feet back from the church. All of a sudden, it went to the back of the church, then went across the road to that Dean monument over there, where just like you turn a light out, it vanished. The sightings became so frequent over the graveyard that residents would sometimes stake out the area just to see a UFO. Usually nothing happened, but on one occasion, 3 people witnessed the granddaddy of UFO graveyard encounters. On October 8th, 1967, Reverend Harley DeLure and 2 other local residents decided to head out to the graveyard in order to see a UFO. They hiked to within a quarter mile of the area and waited to see what would happen. After 2 hours, they were startled by a bright flash of light. Seconds later, they saw a classic flying saucer. As one witness described, something like a big turtle with lights on it appeared level with the top of the house. It wasn't more than 6 feet off the ground, and it had 3 or 4 recessed lights on it that shined toward the graveyard and down on the ground too. As the 3 men watched, the object hovered low over each of the graveyards, shining down powerful beams of light as if searching for something. They then noticed a chilling detail. The object had stopped and targeted a particular gravesite with its beam of light. The only thing unusual about this gravesite was that it was very recent, only a day old. I know. In fact, the funeral had just been held earlier that day. After several minutes of hovering over the gravesite and shining down beams of light, the object disappeared. The 3 men inspected the area, but nothing seemed to be disturbed. Said one witness, "We thought for sure we'd see something, but when we got there wasn't anything there." The Reverend recommended that the body be exhumed and examined for signs of disturbance. However, nothing was ever done. The witnesses were convinced that the UFO was showing a definite interest in the new grave. It was a pattern they would later observe on many occasions. Said one witness, it seemed like every time there was a new grave, within the next couple of nights, people would see lights up there.
That's interesting.
That's a good one. Yeah, for some reason, that particular area of cemeteries, really lots of sightings. I wonder if they're still going on, because these were the it'd be interesting to go deeper into that. Elk Garden, West Virginia.
Right. Wonder where that
these
is.
Are the 60s and 70s.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty neat.
That's crazy, though.
Yeah.
Like the new graves. Like,
I know.
it's
I
interesting.
and Preston Dennett, man, God, he's the best.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So tonight, unintentionally, I found this one. This is from, I think, we'll put it in the show notes, but I think it was Haunted, oh my God, Virginia Highlands, I think.
Cool.
And this is the New River Valley section of the book. And this is called Bark at the Moon. Okay. And this is about Buffalo Mountain Natural Preserve, Buffalo Mountain in Floyd County.
Nice.
So Buffalo once grazed at the base of Buffalo Mountain, a commanding rise providing sea views for miles along the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Crooked Road, Virginia's Heritage Music Trail. For generations, Floyd County settlers have noted this humpback-shaped peak, named actually because it looks like the back of a buffalo. Parents would once naturally tell their children they could roam wherever they wanted so long as they kept the sight of the buffalo. But many might caution against roaming the highest reaches of this mysterious mountain, standing nearly 4,000 feet. Rattlesnakes claim the cavities of the blue-gray rocks called kettles, raven's nests, and rattlesnake den. The Buffalo Mountain Natural Area Preserve as well provides a sanctuary for black bear, rare plants. Oh, sorry, God. Just because I'm like leaning on this little thing. And an insect called Quartz Terab's giant mealybug found nowhere else in the world. Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Still, lights have been seen flashing around a cemetery near Buffalo Mountain, and it's believed something other than an ever-howling coyote might appear to bark at the moon.
Oh, wow.
Here it's told a boy in the 1800s fell in love with a white girl, but the girl's family disapproved of their union. And her brothers ran to bash that Indian boy's brains out on Buffalo Mountain. Now it's said, when the moon looks red, you can climb this rocky peak and still hear that Indian boy scream. Isn't it crazy?
Wow.
It's crazy.
That's trippy. I'd love to hear it.
Or something else is screaming out there. We gotta check that out. Bigfoot or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I bet so. Alrighty.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Stan Gordon's book, Silent Invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And just a little background for those that don't know, Stan Gordon is and was a paranormal researcher from Pennsylvania who had a hotline in that area in the 70s. And he was really young when he started. He was a teenager when he started researching this stuff, and did a UFO hotline. And in the year 1973, things exploded in Pennsylvania. I think it was a UFO flap pretty much everywhere that year.
Wow, okay.
But it was really heavy UFO and Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania of that year. Even the first day, January 1st of 73, there were like 3 or 4 sightings that day.
My birthday.
Yeah. But this is one this is a really good one. September 1st, 1973, Youngstown, and that's Pennsylvania. 6:35 p.m. That evening at about 6:35 on September 1st, Miss Paul and her baby were visiting her mother's grave site at the Youngstown Cemetery. While placing some fresh flowers on the grave, the young mother heard what she thought was the sound of a baby crying in the distance, but did not pay much attention to it, thinking that it was coming from a house over the hill. She also noticed a strong, annoying odor, like something that had been dead for a while. Miss Paul visited the cemetery daily and had never smelled this before. Her young child was walking around the area and approaching near the edge of the woods about 30 feet away. At about the same time, the child began to cry. The mother looked toward the baby and was shocked to see a tall, hairy creature with large red eyes standing in the weeds, only a few feet from the child. It seemed as though it was when the baby began to cry, the creature started to slowly walk toward the child. The woman ran without hesitation and grabbed her baby, then quickly got into her car. The woman said the creature was at least 6 feet tall and covered with long black hair. It had long arms and there was hair on its arms and down over its shoulders. The eyes were large and appeared like balls of fire. The nose was wide and it had pointed ears. The face had features of an ape. She described the creature by saying it looked like a man, but it wasn't, and I didn't take time to look. It could pass for an ape. The woman rushed to her father's farm, which was located about 5 miles away outside of Latrobe. Her father said that when she arrived at his home, she was very upset and stated that his daughter is a very brave person. Do you want to hear the continuance of that and what happened before this? Okay. It was about 1 hour after Miss Paul and her baby had encountered a creature in the Youngstown Cemetery that her relatives on the farm to which she fled had their own encounter with a Bigfoot. Whether it was the same creature that somehow followed the mother and child to the family farm or another creature, we will never know. The farm is located in a rural area outside of Latrobe. Some other family members noticed at the time that their farm animals were acting oddly. The dogs were lying down and growling. One dog was lying in its doghouse and just moving its eyes around, seemingly afraid to move its head. A pony appeared very frightened as well. One woman saw a huge, dark creature step out from the corner of the farmhouse. The creature was about 6 to 7 feet tall and hair covered. It had very long arms and was standing erect. A foul odor was also in the air. Another man saw it running toward the woods. He shot at it but missed. The family called the state police to report what had happened at the cemetery and at the farm. A state trooper later went to the farm to interview the witnesses. The trooper escorted Mrs. Paul and the baby back to their home a few miles away, since the woman was afraid to drive by herself after her encounter. A WCU FOSG team, that's their paranormal team, was sent to the cemetery to search the area. During the search, the remains of a dead sheep were found. The carcass had apparently been there for a while. It appeared that something had eaten the animal. I went to the farm to interview some of the witnesses that night, and upon speaking with Miss Paul, it was apparent that she was very disturbed over the experience. She felt the creature had picked up the scent of the baby and had followed them to the farm. Her. Yeah. Here indeed was another case where a person had seen a creature at one location, and a short time later, a creature showed up at the second location where the witness had relocated. I've read that a few times.
Right.
Where people think these things have followed them in even distances of like 30 to 60 miles.
Right.
And they're like, how is that even possible? But the things show up at their house. It's just insane. So let me read you the account that happened before this that morning. Okay. This is one of my favorite. This is amazing. September 1st, 1973. Penn Township, early morning. Penn Township is a small rural community located just a short distance away from Jeannette. That area, located near Harrison City, has a long history of close UFO encounters. I received a very early morning call on September 1st from a male caller who had a strange story to relate to me. The man sounded very serious and thought that he should make me aware of this information. According to the caller, he knew 3 women who had a frightening experience. The women were reluctant to report the account, fearing ridicule, and they did not want to get involved. The women told their friend that they were traveling on a country road near Penn when they observed a large UFO which was on the ground. The object was described as metallic and rectangular in shape. The witnesses slowed down to observe the object. While they looked on, a door-like structure suddenly appeared along with steps that led from the doorway. Then the most unusual aspect of the encounter reportedly occurred. The women said that exiting the doorway were 2 very tall, hairy Bigfoot-like creatures that ran down the steps and continued into the nearby woods. That was the last they saw of the creatures and UFO as the women sped away from the area.
Well, there
Can
you
you
go.
fucking imagine? Oh my, yeah. They were coming there in UFOs. That's it. God, I love
That's crazy.
that.
1973. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I think I love how in Where the Footprints in Timothy Renner and Joshua Cutchin, is that his name? Joshua Cutchin?
Mm-hmm.
How they talk about the paranormal association with these spaces, like bodies of water, graveyards, burial sites. What's another one? Things like that. These, yeah, I can't remember the other,
like mines or
yeah, caves, things like that. It's fascinating to me.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Came out of the ship.
Oh God, I'd kill to see that.
And just the site when it started, her hearing a baby crying, right?
Yeah, that classic.
So was it like mimicking? Like, was it because she had a kid there? I don't know. That's just weird.
Right.
It's creepy.
And so many people have reported that same thing. I watched I'm so terrible. I'm going to forget the name, but I watched a 70s Bigfoot movie the other day on YouTube that I'd never been aware of. And it was great. It was so good. Why can't I remember the name? But
it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll have it in the show notes by the time this comes out. But it was so good, and that account was almost the cemetery account that I just read with the child and the mom.
Mm-hmm.
That was in the movie perfectly. So I don't know if they had read that account, because I think this movie
just was like that. Yeah.
It was exactly like that. Well, there was a slight difference because there were other people there.
Okay.
But it was the thing, the child walked towards the edge of the woods, was crying. The mom noticed, ran and grabbed the kid and sped away. But yeah, that movie was like 1975. And that happened in 73. So it's possible they had heard that story, or maybe it was another story, or, but yes, I will let you guys know the name of that movie. I highly recommend it. It was great.
Nice.
Yeah. Had some funny parts too.
Oh, that's perfect.
The saucers are up there, and the cemetery's out there. But I'll be locked up in there.
All right, so now we're going to talk about movies. And the first thing that came to mind was Phantasm and like Pet Sematary, and another one that I think you're going to talk about, so I won't say it. But that's not what I watched. I watched A House by the Cemetery from 1981.
Yes.
It's Italian, right? Italian film?
Yeah.
All right, so like
It's
a couple.
It's one of the good ones.
A couple and their son, their young son, are moving into a house that was the dad's ex-colleague, Dr. Peterson, who committed suicide and after murdering his mistress, I believe. And then it kind of it starts out with like a couple in the house, right? The abandoned house. Like they went in there to sex or whatever, and then she's like looking for the boyfriend or whatever and gets killed. Right. And then there's the scene where the little boy is like looking at the picture of the house on the wall.
Yeah.
And he sees like a woman in the window, right? Like it's like this weird creepy scene where he's like staring, this like kid staring at the picture, and he sees something. And then there's also this little girl who he meets when they go there, but only he can see her, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she tells them to stay away.
Yeah.
And I love it because it's like the housewife or whatever. I don't know how much housework she's doing.
Yeah.
But it's like the housewife and it's like, you know, when they're picking up the keys and stuff and everybody's helping them out, and it's like, you know, we promise we'll have you a nanny soon, like, and it's like, oh my god, like she might have to watch her kid for like a couple of days. And then her husband, like, there's a scene a little bit later, the husband's like, you know, we can get you some pills for your, you know, because you're stressed out. I'm like, she's getting pills, she's got a nanny, like, I'm like, okay.
That part of the movie reminds me so much of another Italian movie that I love, that I think they even got sued by the movie company because it was so close to The Exorcist. Beyond the Door.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. The wife just can't be bothered, you know.
Right.
The kids are like 6 and 7, running around saying fuck all the time, and not that that's a big deal, but it's just, yeah, it's that whole thing.
And then there's this scene where they go in the basement because something's going on in the basement. Okay, right.
Yeah.
But they can't get the door open and stuff, but then they finally do and everything. But they go in the basement. The dad gets attacked by a bat.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I don't even know if bats attack like this.
Yeah.
But it like ends up on his hand and he can't get it off, like it's attacking him. And like she's crying in the corner. I'm like, fuck, like get rid of her, because like it's not even gonna help you. He's like taking a knife and trying to fucking stab that in the kitchen.
Yeah.
He's in the corner screaming. I'm like, can you try to help? Like,
it's so Italian. It's Fulci, Lucio Fulci film is fantastic style. Some people are just major fans of his, and I they're beautiful films visually.
Right. Right.
But it's sometimes you're halfway through the movie and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, you know, like,
Yes, I did not love the main female character, or
yeah,
he's the main character. So she
yeah,
kind of got on my nerves a little bit. It's like,
yeah. That seems to pop back up in a lot of the Italian horror films, how annoying Americans are, you know. I think that's on purpose.
and then how did it end? It was like Freudstein, like somebody that had owned that, or what was it? Who was the guy in the basement? Was it the guy that killed himself?
Honestly,
Or
I can't even remember.
I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Dr. Peterson. It might have been Dr. Peterson. But there's like something in the basement, a guy, I guess, but he's like all like shriveled up and I guess killing all these people for their blood, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think everybody dies at the end because I think the little boy ends up walking away with the other two ghosts. So
Yeah. It it was the doctor,
right,
like rotting in the basement.
right,
Yeah.
killing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I watched, and I didn't get to watch the other stuff on my list this time, but
Yeah.
I know that you did. So
So how did you feel about the movie overall?
it was good. It wasn't one of
Yeah.
my favorites.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a good. It's definitely not Fulci's best. I think Fulci's best film is The Beyond,
right,
and I'd recommend that one to anybody. But with the Italian horrors, they're all beautiful, you know.
right,
But some of them are really fucking bizarre and out there and confusing. You know, there'd
right.
be a lot of Italian horror fans who would disagree with me on that, but yeah, I liked it. Like I said, it's been a while, but it's kind of hit or miss with those Italian movies sometimes.
Right,
But the ones that are good are fantastic.
right. It was interesting, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, they tended to take it to the extreme, which I like.
Right.
Yeah. Well, cool.
What
Yeah.
did you
How did you like the soundtrack? Did you notice it?
Did I notice it?
It's
I
some
don't
good
think I
music.
did.
Yeah. Especially at the beginning. There's the good music in it.
All right.
Yeah. All right. The first one I thought of that so many people love for good reason, Return of the Living Dead.
Right. I didn't mention that.
As a graveyard film, that's number one on my list. Everybody's pretty much seen it, but the plot is young punk rock kid goes to work for a medical supply company, you know, the type of place that sells skeletons to medical schools and stuff like that. So it's like a warehouse full of that stuff. And the old guys showing him the ropes, and they seem to be getting along really. And that's, I digress for a minute. One of the best things about this movie is the relationship between Frank and Freddie.
Right.
The kid employee and the older employee who's like a giant kid himself. So,
right.
And it's just so good. It's the perfect movie. It's I hate the word comedy horror, but it's the king of funny horror movies. It's so good. And so anyway, the Frank is telling Freddie, he's like, yeah, you know, that story, Night of the Living Dead, that movie, that's a true story. and it's based on the military had this chemical that turned people into zombies, and they had to contain it. And the guy's like, bullshit. And he's like, no, we got the drums of that shit in the basement. It got delivered him by accident. And he's like, no way. So they go down and check it out. And of course, classic like Three Stooges scene.
Right.
Frank smacks the side of the drum and the chemical shoots up into their faces. So this... yeah, they released the chemical, and I won't give it away for people who haven't seen it. I think everybody's seen it at this point,
Right.
but
Right.
it's the best. The soundtrack is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best soundtrack ever. TSOL, the Cramps, the Flesh Eaters. You've got... I had 3 crushes
Right.
of actresses in the 80s when I was a kid. 3. Shannon Tweed was number 1. I talked about her last episode. Number 2, Linnea Quigley.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, Jewel Shepard. Linnea Quigley and Jewel Shepard are in this movie.
Right.
And it's so good. It's just the best movie ever. Yeah, I never get sick of it. I love it.
Right.
It's the best. And the guy who played Freddy, Tom Matthews, I like a lot, and he's in the next movie I picked.
Okay.
He's the lead in the next movie I picked, which is Friday the 13th, Part 6. Now, we kind of stick to supernatural films on this.
Right,
and
right.
The Friday the 13th series is mostly like slashes, but 6 is the exception. It's, to me, the good one. And it's where Jason becomes a supernatural figure, you know.
Right, right.
So, yeah, it's my favorite out of the series. Although that being said, when I was a kid, I saw everyone. I went to the theater when the new ones came out.
Like every time you were on it.
I was there first day. And but Friday the 13th, Part 6 is my favorite. So Tom Matthews plays Tommy Jarvis, which if you're a fan of the series, you know Tommy Jarvis was played by Corey Feldman in Part 4.
Mm-hmm.
They killed Jason, and then Tommy Jarvis is institutionalized in 5. He's played by another weird guy. And then Part 6, he comes back as a totally different actor, Tom Matthews, which is the best. Tom Matthews is the best, Tommy Jarvis. But so yeah, the movie starts out, and it's fantastic right away. You've got action, and it's so weird. Nobody ever talks about this. The movie starts out he's in the car. He's escaped the mental asylum with his buddy, who also escaped with him from the mental institution. And his plan, he has to go to the graveyard to see Jason Voorhees' body to make sure he's dead.
Right.
He has to make sure he's dead so he can't kill anybody else. The fucking guy he brings with him is Horseshack from Welcome Back, Kotter. It's like, and it's just so glaring. Like, I can't stop looking at him like, that's Horseshack. That's what.
Right.
But so yeah, they go to the graveyard, and in a ridiculous, fantastic turn of events, they dig up the body. Jason's there with maggots coming out of him, and Tom Matthews pulls a pole off of the fence and starts stabbing him with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about this time, lightning comes out of the sky.
Of course.
And strikes Jason and revives him. Yeah, of course. So it brings Jason back to life, and it awakens Jason as a supernatural being, which I think is fantastic because the plots just get more and more out there as it goes on, which I love. And Yeah, it's funny. It's nonstop action. It's the first movie where they kind of stopped taking themselves seriously.
Right.
You know, and at the end of it, is an awesome Alice Cooper song called
So,
"He's Back," the man behind the mask.
right.
And
Right.
I was so into that when I was a kid. It came out in '86, and
Right.
by the time that came out on video, I had like put my boombox up to the TV to record that song. I loved it so much.
You're like, I need this song.
Yeah, so I had that on tape from sticking my boombox up against the TV. But that's how, and I still love that song. It's so goofy. Yeah. So
Back when we had boom boxes.
yeah, yeah, I still remember what that one looked like.
Right.
But yeah, love those two movies. Those are both movies from my childhood, and they're just the first ones that pop in my head when I think about graveyards and movies. But there's so many, of course.
Right.
And the third one I picked was one that I had tried to enjoy in the past and couldn't get past the first because the characters are so annoying. It's called Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Right. That one's tricky at first because when it starts, you're like, what? This isn't what I expected. Right.
Yeah. The director and screenwriter, Alan Ormsby, is also the main character in this movie, and he's super annoying. Which he must be a great actor because he's really irritating. And so he is head of like a acting troupe, and because he's like a sociopath, he takes them all to an island,
right,
where there's a like abandoned graveyard, and he wants to do a satanic ritual and bring the dead back to life. So they dig up a corpse.
Right.
And actually
and they're all dressed in like really groovy, right?
Oh yeah, it's so cool. And the women are beautiful in this movie.
Right.
They they're all groovy, and well, I won't give too much away, but the ritual works and things get weird, of course. And this was really cool. I never knew this, but when I was looking up some stuff about the movie, this guy wrote on the IMDb page, he says, my mother-in-law actually lives in the house that they filmed this in.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and the house is haunted.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and I thought that was really cool.
Right.
Yeah, let me find it. I'm sorry. It might take me a sec. But it was really interesting. But it was a definitely independent movie. And but I once I was able to stick with it, I really like it a lot now.
Right.
It turns for the better, definitely.
Right, it's kind of like a novel that starts out slow for a minute. Yeah,
I'll read this post. This was from a guy in January 2007 on the IMDb page about this movie. Interesting tidbit. I used to live in the house where the movie was shot. It belongs to my ex-mother-in-law, and trust me, she is much scarier than any zombie. The site is located in Coconut Grove in Miami, Florida. She actually purchased the property with the original house that appeared in the movie, but prior to her being able to start after Hurricane Andrew blew by in 92, it knocked over. Oh, I think I got that wrong. Yeah. It appeared in the movie, but prior to her being able to start renovating the original house, it burnt down. She later built a new home on the same site. Interesting enough, after Hurricane Andrew blew by in 92, it knocked over a huge avocado tree in the backyard. How cool would it be to have an avocado tree?
Right.
And my ex-brother-in-law and I dug up tons of old turn-of-the-century bottles that were buried under the tree.
Interesting.
I know. Very cool. Even more interesting, the late Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the great conservationist champion, used to frequent the home, which was once owned by the Deering family and would summer there. The home she lived in until she passed away is just a few blocks away. Very interesting piece of land with a very interesting history. And don't get me started on my own personal ghostly experiences at the house. Really. So yeah,
yes,
that was really cool. Yeah, I know. So it makes you wonder, maybe they knew some of that history and that's why they chose to film there. They seem like fun people, you know, so they might have, I haven't dug deep enough with that, but also the director Bob Clark and the screenwriters Alan Ormsby and Bob Clark did a few other really good movies together. They were involved with the Porky's movies, which I love, and one of the movies I talked about last podcast, Popcorn.
Okay.
They were responsible for that. So in my eyes, they did some great stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And this is I don't know if this is their earliest stuff, but it's pretty early. So yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. And an interesting thing. When I lived in Wilmington, there's this great store there called Whatever Wilmington, and it's all film memorabilia.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they have some fantastic stuff in there. And I got one thing from there, the Danzig Ouija board, but that came from there. But every time I went in there was one thing I wanted, but they were asking $500 for it, and it was original poster of this movie.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an original from 1972 from God knows where, and I think they even did because it was an independent thing on the drive-in circuit back then, which is so cool. They even talked some of the restaurants in the area into like doing a children shouldn't play with dead things menu.
Oh my God.
It's like the fries were fingers and the ketchup was blood.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's a fun movie like that. I dig it.
That's awesome. We'll have to do a drive-in episode. Oh my God. All right, go.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and I need the soundtrack to that movie. Jeff Clayton, TerraVision, who I love so much and releases a lot of these great independent horror movies. They release the soundtracks, and I have a bunch of them. They released this, and Jeff Clayton from Anti-Scene showed it on one of his live streams. And yeah, I gotta have it. I just hadn't picked it up yet, but I will. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's it for movies.
Oh, did you watch? I thought. Well, the other night you said you were about to watch. Maybe you did. I thought you.
We can talk about it.
Grave of the Vampire. I thought.
I couldn't make it through it. I've seen it before, and it just bored me to death.
Well, when you said that, it made me think of the Highgate Cemetery and the vampire story from that, like a real story.
Yeah.
So,
Let's hear it.
in the late 60s, like early 70s in London, okay, Highgate Cemetery, there started to be reports. Well, the newspaper started putting out articles. Is there a vampire in Highgate Cemetery? So there were a few reports collected, and there were two main people that came out. One person was David Farrant, and he was like a paranormal researcher, and he was in one of the articles from the newspaper, and he claimed to have reports from as early as 1969 where people were seeing something by the cemetery. And one was an old lady walking a dog, and she saw a tall, dark figure, like kind of floating in the air, and it had red eyes.
Yeah.
And then she also said that the air, like everything, like it got cold. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one was an accountant who got lost in the cemetery and started hearing bells. So he followed that, thinking maybe it led to the street or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he said the temperature dropped, and he turned and saw a dark figure behind him, and it vanished.
Oh, wow.
And so then that prompted Farrant, being like into the paranormal, to spend the night in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And at first he said, he figured maybe somebody's fucking around, like they're breaking in or hanging out outside, you know what I mean? Like scaring people or whatever.
Yeah.
So he was skeptical, but he said he spent the night in the cemetery, and around midnight, he did see a figure, a dark figure floating, hovering, and it had red eyes. And the air got cold, and he started to feel like he was getting drained. And he realized that he was under psychic attack, and he repeated a Kabbalistic incantation to protect himself. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Now he never called it a vampire, but he did say he saw a dark figure. And this was all in the newspapers back then, okay? It was like a big thing. And then came this other guy, Sean Manchester. And he contacted the newspaper, and they interviewed him about whatever he thought about this case, right?
Yeah.
Now, he said that a king of the vampires was buried there.
Oh, wow.
And this king of the vampires was from Romania. All right.
Yeah.
And he was interred there, and his followers had even purchased a house for him in the West End.
Yeah.
And that the vampire's reappearance was due to recent satanic rituals in the cemetery, and that's why the vampire was back.
Oh.
All right, so both guys, they were both like hot on this case and in the newspapers. And they did both believe that such a cult or satanic back then during that time period, right? Rituals being done in the cemetery may have kind of awoken something, so one guy's saying it's a vampire buried there, the other guy's saying you might have just attracted something, you know what I mean, if you're doing weird things in the cemetery. So the newspapers were like going crazy with these stories, right?
Yeah.
It's like a hot item.
Yeah.
And Friday the 13th, March 1970, they had a TV show about it. Okay. Just talking about the whole thing. And 2 hours later, after the show aired, people rushed the cemetery. And the cops had to come, and the people had like stakes and shit with them.
Oh my God.
Seriously, the police had to come out and they were rushed in the cemetery because of the TV show.
Oh,
And
that's great.
that's just such an interesting story. There's books written about it. And when you said that the other night, when you were like, I think I'm gonna watch Grave of the Vampire, it just popped
Yeah,
in my head. I'm like, yeah, I got to bring that up.
that's fantastic. You know what? And this is a little off topic, but it makes me think about the whole the search for that guy who right now they're searching for that dude in Florida who may have killed his girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It makes the first thing I thought of when I saw they were searching for that guy. I was thinking, how many fucking yahoos like took off work to go and try and be the guy that found him in that reserve,
right.
you know? I mean, I bet there is a few, you know. I don't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of similar, yeah. But
like whatever's hot in the news, like people
yeah,
storm Area 51 or something.
yeah. I have a story about where I used to live, a cemetery there.
Okay.
It's downtown. It's in the middle of downtown Wilmington, which is a beautiful, fun place. And it's called St. James Episcopal Church. And there's a legend about a guy who's buried there named Samuel Jocelyn, but his grave isn't marked. So you don't know which one it is. And but the legend is that in the 1800s, him and his buddy were kind of like us. They're really into the paranormal, and they used to have these long discussions about afterlife and what happened when you died and stuff. So the story is that one day they made a pact in front of other people that said, hey, if I die first, I'll give you a sign. I will somehow let you know that the afterlife is real. So they shook on it, and that was it. Well, sometime later, Sam Jocelyn, him and his wife get in a fight, and he, for whatever reason, jumps on his horse and takes off in the swamp. And it's really scary swamps around there, and something happened, and he fell off the horse and broke his neck and died. So they find his body, they bury him, and right away his friends just totally grief stricken. Right. Said he took it worse than anybody. And he keeps having these dreams that are waking him up, and he looks at the foot of his bed, and it's his buddy, like, go to my grave, go to my grave, go to my grave. And he's freaking out, like, oh my God, you know, like, is this real? Am I dreaming? Is this for real? So it just keeps happening over and over. And finally he gets to the point. It's like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go to his grave. Right. And so he gets his buddy. They go dig up the guy's grave and open the casket, and there's claw marks. They had buried the guy alive. Oh my God. And so he was, I guess, projecting to him, like, hey, come get
like,
me.
Help me.
Yeah.
And he's like, give me a few days. I got to work up.
Yeah, it was too late. Anyway, that's the story. And so I used to hang out at this cemetery all the time. Every time I go downtown, I would go hang out there. It's really neat. And it's just right there. Like, you're literally in the middle of downtown. You just step over, and there's this beautiful church with this courtyard, and the cemeteries date back to the 1700s. Right. And yeah, it's just a cool place. And the legend is that if you're there at night, nobody can stay the night without seeing him. Oh. Or hearing his howls, you know, from underneath the ground. Oh. Yeah. So that's been a legend for almost a couple hundred years now. Famous Wilmington legend, which there's a bunch.
Right.
There's
right.
a bunch of ghost stories in that like 3-block radius right there.
It's like a bunch.
Yeah, there's a ton just in that one area, and there's been a lot of cool movies filmed in that area too. But yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. Samuel Jocelyn.
Nice. And I've always thought about making that kind of pact with someone, but then at the same time, it's like, but you
I know you.
But do I want you to like fucking sneak up on me?
No matter how much you prepare for it, you know it's gonna scare the fuck out of you when it happens.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I would rather be scared and get in here. Yeah.
All right. Well, if I die, I'll come.
Definitely.
I'll come pop up.
I will too. I promise.
All right. We've made a pact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
And hopefully the medical technology is a little better now. So hopefully
we're not buried alive.
Yeah. Who knows how many times that did happen back then?
Right.
God almighty, you know.
Right.
But then, I read some other things about it. Said, the whole story is probably bullshit, but who knows? I mean, it had to have happened.
And that's the fun part about legends.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Pity the poor little darling now. She never had a chance.
All right, I want to start including novels in the podcast.
Okay.
And so I picked some out to recommend. The first series I have not read. It's on my list, but I haven't read it. But it sounds good, so I'm going to tell you about it. It's called the Cemetery Girl Trilogy, and it's by Charlaine Harris, who wrote True Blood.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I haven't read that yet, but it's about this girl, Calexa Rose Dunhill, and she woke up bruised and bloody with no memory of who she is in the cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the Cemetery Girl series, and she lives in the cemetery. She lives in a crypt, and she avoids human contact, but she sees spirits.
Oh, wow.
And she sees a murder in the cemetery one night, and the victim's body rises. She starts seeing visions and memories that are not her own. So it sounds really good, right?
Yeah.
And the True Blood, I mean, if all you did was see it on HBO, just shut up. The book, I'm the person that read all the books first, so I was like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I get it. I get like, hey, this character's cool, so we're not going to kill him off or whatever. But once you make one decision like that, the whole thing changes. It's like the butterfly effect or something.
Yeah.
But so that series sounds good. And then this series I did read, it's by Amanda Stevens, and it's the Graveyard Queen series. And it's about Amelia Gray, who is a cemetery restorer. So that's really cool, right?
Yeah.
And it talks about that a lot. So it's really cool. But she also sees spirits.
Yeah.
But she was taught, because her father was a cemetery restorer, she was taught early when her father realized she could see spirits. and I guess maybe he could too. She was taught early to protect herself against that, to like avoid that.
Yeah.
She was taught some rules by her father to not notice. You know what I mean? Not be noticing.
Yeah.
And but that kind of changes because she meets this one spirit, and it's a police detective, a dead police detective, who notices her noticing him, and kind of enlists her to help him solve a case. And it's
Yeah.
so good. It's such a good series. It's really, really good and spooky and just really interesting, and a lot of stuff about like cemeteries and symbolism and on graveyard tombstones, and it's a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah,
So
that sounds great.
I do recommend that one.
Nice. Cool. There was a book I had, it's probably been about 10 years now, and it's so funny because this kind of ties in with what we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great book I had about 10 years ago called, it's not a novel, it was nonfiction memoirs of a mortician in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta. And if you know, Atlanta is a scary place, and so it was a busy morgue, and this guy worked as the head guy in the God,
Right, you're pulling and it popped up, right?
Yeah, it just totally popped up. But he worked for the city of Atlanta as the coroner, and retired. Was very successful, good at his job. And this book is his memoirs. It's called Blood Beneath My Feet. And and now it goes for astronomical prices. I have no idea what happened to my copy. It's one of the best books I ever read.
Wow.
I even gave it to my mom to read. She loved it too, because she's into all this stuff too. And but it just popped in my head. I highly recommend that book, and it totally needs a reissue. It was published by one of the greatest publishers, I think, of all time, called Farrell House. And Adam Parfrey, who was the head of that publishing house, has passed away, and there's still Farrell House books out there, but without Adam Parfrey, it's not the same. But
right.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to get that off.
No. and you made something else pop in my head. Sharon McCrum. What is the series called? I'm not sure what it's called. But the books are about, they take place in different places, like I think North Carolina and maybe Tennessee. But the books they take like the traditional music, the ballad songs and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they take that, and then there's all kinds what they do with the characters in the small town and stuff is.
Oh wow, she was born in Wilmington.
Really?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of so they take the traditional ballad songs and they turn that into like there's like a murder mystery or something like that.
Yeah.
Song in each novel is like really important, and it plays into it, like, so history and a lot of like conjure and like southern magic, she does a really great job of just making that really normal. And there's an old lady in it, and Nora Bonesteel, and one of the characters, and it just stuff like covering mirrors when somebody dies, and just it's all part of just the normal everyday
Right.
of the characters, but it's just they're really good, really good.
Yeah, it looks here like she was very prolific, and
Yeah, she also has a
Because
Scottish series too.
yeah, the book Celebrate the History and Folklore of Appalachia, which
Mm-hmm.
we're all about, and
Yeah,
it's cool. She was born in Wilmington. That's great.
very cool. That
Yeah.
everything connects.
Yeah. Yeah, it says she was the author of the Elizabeth McPherson mystery series, the ballad series.
The ballad series is the one
Yeah.
I'm talking about, but I also have the McPherson series, and that's like Scottish stuff.
Oh wow, that's great.
But they're all like murder mysteries. So
Yeah, and we'll leave, as always. We'll put
show notes.
So yeah, great. Yeah, I'll have to check her out.
Yeah, it's really cool. Good stuff.
Yeah. Nice. She won a lot of awards.
Yeah, she has a lot.
Cool.
And you were going to talk about music a little bit? You have something?
Yeah, I kind of deviated. Since we have our little weirdo story to talk about, I figured I picked 3 cemetery songs, and then I said, let's go with 3 songs about necrophilia.
All right.
And so and of course, these are all songs that I've loved since I was a kid. Slayer, Dead Skin Mask, off of the album Seasons in the Abyss, and that's a song about Ed Gein and his creepy practices of fucking dead bodies and wearing their skin. And anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge TSOL fan. I love TSOL so much. And the song that even people who aren't TSOL fans, they know the song Code Blue. And that song is about necrophilia. And the chorus is, do what I want and she don't complain, because I want to fuck the dead. And everybody, it's so funny to see, like, if you look up TSOL live footage, because they're still doing shows now. These guys are in their 60s, and when they play that song, the crowd every time erupts and sings along. It's such a great sing along. And the third song is Anti-Scene Star Whore off of the Eat More Possum album.
We talked about this one night.
Yeah, I'm a big Anti-Scene fan. This is one of my favorite songs, and the song comes from the book Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger, and what that book was a collection of myths, I can never say that word, and urban legends of old Hollywood. And the legend is that when Marilyn Monroe died, the coroner pimped out her body to rich folks.
Wow, I believe that's possibly true.
Yeah. So the story is that for $50,000 you could go in and have sex with Marilyn Monroe's corpse, and that several men did that.
Wow.
So that's what that song is about, and one of my top anti-scene songs. I think it's great. And yeah, so those are my 3 sicko songs. Yeah.
All right. And as always, at the end, we pick something, or he picks something to throw in at the end.
Yeah.
And what do we got this week?
Yeah,
This
well, I
month?
know our thing is the supernatural, but this was just too bizarre
Hmm.
and weird not to talk about. It's about Karen Greenlee. Karen Greenlee was, I think I'm pretty sure she's still alive. She's in her 70s now. And she's probably considered, besides several infamous serial killers who participated in necrophilia, she's probably the most famous necrophiliac. On December 17th, 1979, she was arrested. 2 days before, let me back up. She had worked as a apprentice to a mortician.
Hmm.
And I think she had worked in a couple different funeral homes. And she's, anyway, she took off with a dead body. I think it was a 22-year-old male corpse.
Right. She stole the hearse, right?
She stole the hearse. And,
And disappeared with the body.
Yeah, the family waiting and everything.
Right.
At the cemetery. She takes off in the hearse, and they don't find her for like 2 or 3 days. And when they find her, she's snuggled up with the body in the hearse, and had written a suicide note, and had overdosed on 20 pills of codeine Tylenol, which
didn't kill her.
I guess a lot of people make that mistake. 20 pills of codeine ain't gonna do shit. You know, you need some better drugs than that. That's nothing. But anyway, she was definitely a troubled person. And the note, she had confessed to having sex with 20 to 40 corpses, right? And that she said she didn't know why she did it, but she was compelled to do it. This is how she had been her whole life. And yeah, she was arrested. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, she even talked about, not in the note, but in the interview, she talked about, like, from childhood, like, something about the firehouse being next to a cemetery, and there'd be events, and you'd have to go in not the cemetery, the morgue. You'd have to go into that building and use the bathroom, and she
loved it.
Yeah, she would go like sneak around.
Yeah.
And
that's funny you said that. That was one of the most interesting parts of that interview.
Yeah, like she just right away, like she
as a child,
became fascinated.
With death. And so they called her, and because of the note, which was really stupid on her part, but I guess she thought she was going to die. She wanted to confess her so-called sins or whatever. But there was an interesting tidbit, and this isn't the only state like that. There was no law against necrophilia in California.
All against it, right?
Yeah, and so they the charge was like unauthorized use of a hearse,
right,
and maybe interfering with a dead body. But those are misdemeanors,
right?
And,
you're in more trouble for taking the car,
right?
Like...
So they fined her $255, 11 days in jail, and like I said, this is 1979.
Yeah, give us some money.
Yeah. So the mother of the dead man sued.
Right.
And I don't know if she ever got that money, because it doesn't seem like Karen Greenlee had a lot going on, and but
right.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a really interesting story, and one of the most interesting events in all this was going back to Feral House, the publisher Feral House, Adam Parfrey's great publishing house. people who were into the 80s and 90s zine scene like I was, so the underground books and homemade magazines, Feral House was a big deal, and they would publish all these books on taboo topics like this and serial killers, Satanism, all that stuff. I love this stuff. Even as a kid, I was totally into this stuff. And one of the most popular books Feral House ever put out was called Apocalypse Culture in 1988, and it was a compilation of articles by people who would be considered outsiders, from even necrophiliacs, pedophiles, all this. It gave them this book kind of showed
Right.
that Jim Jones, the whole gamut of freaks. And
Right.
So Jim Morton, who if you've ever read, which I sorry to ramble, but there was an excellent book that came out in the 80s called Incredibly Strange Films. And the two authors of that were Boyd Rice, the famous noise musician.
We've talked about this, right?
And Jim Morton. And Jim Morton, they were both friends, and they were both really big film geeks. And this book, Incredibly Strange Films, you got to remember, this is pre-internet. So a lot of us who were into these types of movies didn't know about a lot of these movies because they had never been reissued to VHS.
Right.
And, this is pre-streaming and all this. So this book was groundbreaking, in my opinion. It showed a lot of people about these lesser known filmmakers whose movies are now legendary. And because of these two guys, Jim Morton and Boyd Rice, they put a lot of that stuff out there. Anyway, Jim Morton somehow was the only dude to get an interview with Karen Greenland in 1988. And it was published in that book, Apocalypse Culture. And I think it's a fantastic interview. We both read it. And
she it's really good, and he did really good interviewing her. And there's like a part, like she told him like one time she got like she made it sound like people that work in that field know that people do that, like
right.
And she got caught once
before. She she was in the middle of having sex with a body, and
people were coming down the hall.
People came in and caught her. She had
and they just kind of go.
She said she thinks they called the cops, but everybody worked it out to keep it hush hush because they didn't want the publicity. So she was doing this stuff a lot. And she had stole a set of keys and was sneaking in after dark. And I'd like to read this one part of the interview. I don't want to. I'm
curious what you're gonna pick. Okay. It might be what I have right in front of me. Go ahead.
It might be, but this part of the interview is Jim Morton asking her, the question I am most often asked is, how does she do it?
That's not. Well, go ahead.
Okay.
I have the notes here too. Yeah.
Okay. She said, yes, that's the question. People ask questions like that. Even people who seem pretty cool seem to have open minds. Then when you tell them, they say, that's very interesting, then don't want to have much to do with me. I don't mind telling people how I do it. It doesn't matter to me, but anyone adept sexually shouldn't have to ask. People have this misconception that there has to be penetration for sexual gratification, which is bull.
Right.
The most sensitive part of a woman is the front area anyway, and this is what needs to be stimulated. Besides, there are different aspects of sexual expression. Touchy-feely, 69, even holding hands. That body is just laying there, but it has what it takes to make me happy. The cold, the aura of death.
Yes, that's what I wrote down too.
The smell of death. and funeral surroundings.
It
It
all
all
contributes.
contributes. So for her, it was very much an aesthetic thing, you know. And he asked the smell of death, and she says, "Sure, I find the odor of death very erotic. There are death odors and there are death odors. Now, you get your body that's been floating in the bay for 2 weeks or a burn victim. That doesn't attract me much, but a freshly embalmed corpse is something else. There is also this attraction to blood. When you're on top of a body, it tends to purge blood out of its mouth while you're making passionate love. You'd have to be there, I guess."
Yeah,
So-
that's what I wrote down too. That's like, wow.
I was doing a little more reading on it, and evidently she said she regretted giving this interview, which I don't think Jim Morton was disingenuous at all in any way. He just wanted the facts. And
Right. No, it seemed, that's how I read it.
Right. I think he gave her a fair shake. And so yeah, she said later she regretted giving that interview. This is probably the most she had ever talked about it. And I came across something, I don't know it's true, but they said they interviewed her for the Sally Jesse Raphael show, and they ended up not airing it because she was totally unrepentant, and they didn't know how they would spin
it, how that, right, they were afraid probably.
So I'd love to see that unaired episode, but I don't think it's out there. But yeah, interesting story.
All right. That's a nice ending.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.